Hi everyone and welcome back to Numinosophy Academy. I'm Lewis. Today we're going to be looking at another one of these Saints Unscripted videos, this channel from the LDS Church. And the title of today's video is An Ex-Mormon's Story, vertical bar, 3 Mormons. So before we begin, if you could do me a favor and hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm, and we'll begin straight away.
So we got Trusty, Rusty, Dusty on the show.
Yeah, Dusty. Trusty, rusty, crusty, musty. we get a lot of Steves.
Good thing you didn't say lusty.
Yeah, I was like, Lusty, Dusty.
And then we're canceled. So we've got Dusty Smith on the show. And Dusty's story has been shared on LDS Living and things like that.
All over the internet.
All over the internet.
In all honesty.
Because, Dusty, you used to be a Mormon and then an anti-Mormon. And now you're Mormon again.
Yes, I read the story.
You are a Mormon sandwich.
Sort of like that,
With
except
like a real saucy kind of edgy middle.
there is the saucy part.
Yeah.
Right. So I was talking to someone on Reddit, and they told me that they believe the objective of Saints Unscripted, though it may appear that it's aimed at non-Mormons, as a kind of evangelism exercise, a way of spreading to the faith to, would-be converts, that the actual objective of this channel is really to shore up the faith of those Mormons that are already in the church, to kind of resolve for them problems that they may have, resolve those problem issues. And of course, this guy, Dusty Smith, very much plays into that. The guy who was a full-on Mormon, who then rejected it all, was exposed to all the anti-Mormon literature, and then became convinced, I suppose, that actually at the end of the day, Mormonism was really true.
Actually,
Saucy,
I grew up
Dusty.
non-LDS. I converted when I was right after college and served a mission. After my mission is when I left the church.
I think it's interesting that he left his church after his mission. I've heard that is a likely time for people to fall away from the church.
I was in law school, actually. It was my third year of law school when I left the church.
And did you go inactive or did you leave the church?
Oh no, I actually I lost my testimony totally, and I was angry, very angry, and I wrote a letter to the to my stake president and said, please remove my name from the church rolls. So yeah, that's as leaving as you can get. And then I got a letter a couple of months later inviting me to church court. I said, not going. Y'all don't have any authority over me. I've already.
I do wonder what that goldfish there in the corner makes of all of this. It's weird for there to be like church courts and excommunications and things in a church, isn't there? It sounds so kind of medieval.
Rejected you. I didn't go. Then I got another letter about a month later saying that I had been excommunicated. And I happened to go, my last year of law school was during the pageant. And I went to the pageant and there were just tons of anti-Mormons. And I argued with them because I'm in law school. I can argue with anybody. Right?
Yeah, right.
I took that Arguing 101 class.
You are
And
the devil's advocate.
heavy on the devil part, but yeah.
Hadn't finished law school yet, so maybe not the advocate. Okay.
I haven't passed the bar yet, but I came back wanting to be the smartest Mormon ever,
Yeah.
so that I could better argue against anti-Mormons. So I came back and I began to read stuff.
The smartest Mormon ever. I think there's this psychological concept in Jungian psychology called Antyodromia, which is this idea that things are always capable of flipping to their opposite. So who is the most militant atheist? Well, it was the person who was the most fundamentalist Christian. And I think there's a lot of Antyodromia happening here with this Dusty Smith guy. he was the guy I can imagine who was the most on fire for living the LDS faith. And when he left, what does he become? The most militant, ex-Mormon guy you can imagine. And now that he's flipped back again, well, he's the most on fire for the LDS faith once again.
And the more I read, the more I thought, I was never taught this. I was never taught this. And to be perfectly honest, because I was imperfectly honest before now, but to be perfectly honest, I wasn't prepared for a spiritual battle. I was living on 3 hours of sleep a night, working all day, going to school, studying all night, trying to grab 3 hours of sleep here and there, and wasn't prepared for the spiritual battle that I was going to undergo. And I woke up one day and realized that I no longer believed, I no longer had a testimony.
That's odd as well, that the focus is not so much on arguments or disagreement with theology. It's all about his own personal failing. I was in a vulnerable place. I was not getting much sleep, and so I wasn't ready for spiritual warfare, as he puts it.
I wanted to argue with people, and I did. I went and found several, and I was constantly posting, you guys are wrong, you guys are wrong, you guys are wrong, here's why you're wrong, it's a false church, it's a false prophet. You name it, I was spouting it.
Hold on. So do you think that when you made your decision that cognitive dissonance fell in and you were like, well, I made my decision, so now I have to go deep into anti, or did you truly feel like there was no other option than to go anti?
There's always an option, but here's the thing that I don't think that people, if you've left the church, you understand this. If you leave the Baptist church, if you leave the Methodist church, if you leave the Lutheran church, you haven't invested much in those things. A lot of people choose their Baptist church, Lutheran church, Methodist church on who has the best sermon. They like this choir. The best congregation. They don't invest. When you become LDS, you invest in yourself into it. I was a college graduate when I became LDS.
That is interesting. The extent to which different denominations take over your entire identity. So this is a big difference, I think, with kind of liberal Christianity and conservative Christianity in general. That more liberal denominations tend to be what you do on a Sunday much more. Whereas the more conservative you get, and I suppose this must include Mormonism as well, the more it kind of takes over everything. It's no longer just about Sunday. It's what your entire makeup consists of.
Yes, the first time. I quit my job to go on a mission.
Yeah.
Okay? I had family that turned their back on me. I had a girlfriend who turned her back on me. I gave up quite a bit to be LDS. And
the cost, it's a very high cost to enter into Mormonism, and certainly to leave Mormonism. Family, friends, everything is tied up with it. There's a great risk then.
So when you leave that, you feel like you've been cheated.
Or betrayed, yeah.
Absolutely. So it wasn't just ambivalence in my. Now I will say this: there are a lot of people who leave the LDS Church who become atheists, and I never did that. I always believed in God.
Interesting.
Okay, always believed in God. But yeah, holy moly, I was out there. I began to then search out places where I could argue with people. I wanted people to know that I was against.
That's also interesting. I wonder why that is. Ex-Mormon, but still believes in God. I wonder how common that is. I can't imagine that happens very often.
People would post on, there would be different threads, and you could go, and I would start threads. Look at what Joseph did here. Look at what this happened here.
You would have loved Reddit.
And was this just a couple of things, or was it like Joseph polygamy, blacks in the priesthood, women in the priesthood,
I had all kinds of
Heavenly
stuff.
Mother?
Do you want to know one of the biggest arguments that I used against was all the various versions of the first vision?
So, he's obviously, or he obviously became during this period very well versed in all the classic problem areas of the LDS Church. They were just listed there. The planet Kolob, blacks in the priesthood, the first vision, and so forth. Yeah, it's interesting.
I could destroy Joseph on the witness, and I would tell that to Mike.
Yeah.
But that was one of my biggest arguments. The archaeology was another one. I can walk the streets of Jerusalem, but I can't walk the streets of Zarahemla.
It's interesting the lawyer's perspective, because the kind of underlying assumption there is that there's not really a truth. There's not an actual objective truth, because it can be argued this way, it can be argued that way. And what really matters is not what the truth is, but what way can the argument be spun to make it appear as if the truth goes one way or another. That's like the lawyer's skill, I suppose.
Mike and I, over time, became friends. And the hatred went away of the church. And I began to feel a pull. Back in 2005-ish, began to feel a pull. And rejected it. I said, it's just good feelings of my mission, because I really loved my mission. Yeah. Even when I was hating on the church, I would say, but my mission was my best 2 years of my life.
Like, I had some fun times.
I loved being a missionary.
He loved his mission. So here's my hunch. My hunch is that he came across all these problems that he was able to use to argue himself out of the denomination. Now, he's now gone back into the denomination. So you would logically think then that those problems have been resolved. That he had these problems and he was given the answer to help resolve them. And he went, oh, and he saw the light. And so he returned to the denomination. My guess is, or my hunch is, that that's not really the case. That's not really what's happening here. I think those problems have not been resolved. It's my guess. I obviously don't know his mind. But I would imagine that those problems are still just as alive and present in his mind than ever before. But what has happened is there's a trade that's taken place. So Dusty Smith had a choice. He could remain as an ex-Mormon and, just go on with his life being a lawyer. Or he could convert back in and choose to hold the cognitive dissonance that it was necessary to hold in order to be in the church. Now, why would he do that? Well, being in the church clearly affords him a lot of benefits. It gives him status. It gives him opportunity to appear on shows like this and other Mormon literature, I'm sure. To kind of, bolster the faith of other Mormons. That's just a hunch of mine.
In Honduras.
Yeah. Not in Boise.
No, not in Boise. No. I probably wouldn't have had fun in Boise. But I did. I loved being a missionary. So I kind of rejected it. Then in 2009, the pull came back a little bit. And that's when the miracle started, was in 2000. What precipitated some of the miracles was in 2009. In 2009, I went down to the Mexican border to do...
So before we get into the miracles, I think there's a choice that's been made. It's either a conscious choice or it's an unconscious choice. And the choice was, should I just live with the cognitive dissonance in order to reap the rewards of status and so forth that would come with being in the LDS Church? And he chose that life. He's chosen this life to be within the LDS Church. Now, you could see that as being deeply dishonest. You could construe that as being a lie, even. I'm not sure about that. The reason I'm not sure is I think we make those types of unconscious or conscious calculations to live in a certain way or to accept certain untruths to live in a certain way. And that's what being human is. So, I don't know. I'm willing to give him, to some degree, the benefit of the doubt, if you understand where I'm coming from with that.
So I go down to the border and I contract the swine flu.
I had
man.
the swine flu in 2009. H1N1.
Did you really?
I did.
I had the real bad kind. H1N1
You were much younger then.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Let me tell you,
Same time.
I came back and I was so sick, and I called. I'm a veteran, 6 knee surgeries. They consider me a disabled vet. So I called the VA. They said, "Oh no, don't come here." Nobody would see me.
Yeah.
They were afraid of it.
I remember.
And my
bad.
2 missionaries knocked on my door. My son let them in, and they came up, and I didn't want them there. And they said, "Well, can we give you a blessing?" And I said, "Okay." And they did. And I was immediately healed. Immediately. I mean, I got up out of bed, walked him down.
Okay, so miracle stories. I don't find miracle stories convincing at all. Why? Because what they tend to be is unlikely scenarios which play out, and then a particular narrative or a particular understanding, the miracle narrative, overlaid on top of it, which makes it appear miraculous, as if God is doing some piece of work here. So the reason I don't find it convincing, I can think of examples. So take my dad, for instance. He is an atheist, a scientist. He has no interest in religion whatsoever. And quite a few years back, like 8 years ago, he fell off a ladder and broke his arm in several places. And he went to see the doctor, obviously. The doctor put it in a cast, said he'd need physio, etc., etc. Said it would take years and years and years to heal, if it ever got back to where it was, to its former glory. Now, as it turned out, it healed really quickly. He was back to having full mobility in his arm in a few months or something, which, shocked the doctor. It was way faster than could have possibly been predicted. Now, he is not in any way religious. So what's his explanation for that? Well, he ate right. He did the physio exercises as he was supposed to, and the body can do amazing things. Now, I have no doubt in my mind, if he was a religious person, if he was a Mormon, if he was a fundamentalist Christian, he would have prayed that God would have healed his arm, and, oh wow, within such a short period of time, it confounded the doctors. It's a miracle. So, just by overlaying such miraculous narratives, you're not proving anything by doing that.
Girl starts messaging me. Her name was Garden Girl. And she said, "I feel very, very strangely drawn to you."
And then George Strait was like, "Come to the church."
I'm a country boy. She's a gardener girl.
You probably should stick to just talking. So
Let us be funny on this show.
There's a weird chemistry there. I don't know what that's about.
So anyway, I told her, I said, I got to tell you, I don't mind messaging you, but I'm married. And she wrote back and she says, "I'm 75, get over yourself." So
She just gardens.
yeah, she just gardens.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got talk on the phone one day. She was LDS and I was never going to come back to the church. We were talking and she said, "Do you have any family members in the church?" I said, "No." I said, "Oh, I do. Hang on, I do. I've never met him, but he's a big mucky muck. His name is Dean Jesse. He is a church historian. In fact, if you've read the Joseph Smith papers, you can thank him for that."
Yeah, nice.
But I never met him.
Yeah.
Okay, but I knew that of his existence because my mother did family tree work. And she was a long pause, and she said, "Your cousin is Dean Jesse?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "My cousin is Dean Jesse." Turns out this woman and I are related.
Oh my God, it's a miracle. So, I don't know. Again, this is just, is this an unlikely thing to happen? Yeah, of course. It's not likely that you're going to just bump into someone that happens to be related to you, but it's possible. And you take this unlikely scenario, and again, you just overlay it with the miraculous narrative. And, you know, what, is this supposed to bolster a Mormon's faith? Because these types of stories exist within all Christian denominations, within all religions. And, you know, if you want to say that they affirm Mormonism, then, you know, a similar story that some, Muslim is telling, well, that's surely just as affirming to the Islamic faith. So it doesn't get you anywhere.
Mike, I need you to pray. We need Susan to get this position in Baltimore. It's a 2-week vetting deal, but, you know, please pray for her. And Mike said, absolutely, up in the name of the temple, which Mike had done for 20 years for me. And I said, however, Mike, this is where I got really crafty. I said, if God wants me to be LDS again, he will send Susan to Salt Lake. There was no position open in Salt Lake, and I knew that.
Right. Here's my guess. A position suddenly opens up in Salt Lake City.
The very next day, the person in Salt Lake retires. Very next day, Susan's paperwork is transferred to from Baltimore to Salt Lake, and she's hired without any vetting immediately. So I'll call Mike, and I said, Mike, you're not going to believe this, but Susan's going to Salt Lake.
Wow.
And Mike said, well, you know what you told God? I said, I was just joking. He said, God wasn't.
So, again, you've probably heard of this idea before, but there's this thing called confirmation bias. So you ask a certain question and things play out in a particular way, and it seems miraculous, and you remember the examples of when it seemed miraculous. And then there's that other time, you know, a couple years prior, when he was in the exact same situation, and he similarly said, well, if only a job opened up in Salt Lake City. But it didn't happen. And he doesn't remember that story. Do you get what I mean? I'm not saying that actually happened. But that's what confirmation bias is. We forget these stories that don't fit this overarching belief that we want to enter into.
That's when I decided it was time to hit my knees. And I said, okay, Heavenly Father, you want me to be LDS again? Great. But I have issues. There's issues that I left the church over. Those have never been resolved. I need you to resolve these issues.
Yeah.
And I left it in his hands. And then for the next several weeks, I would wake up in the middle of the night.
And so we return to the classic, classic arguments that you throw up against the LDS Church. You ultimately have to resolve that problem, at least within your own mind. You need to come up with what feels like a satisfactory solution.
With a new answer. Every night. Well, not every night, but almost every night. Some new answer. For example, I told you that geography was one of my issues, right? Archaeology. And so I'm sitting talking to the Lord, and the Lord says, okay, if you walk the streets of Jerusalem, does that make the Bible true? And I said, no. And he said, but if tomorrow someone found a sign down in South America or somewhere, and they wipe it off and it says, welcome to Zarahemla, population 450, what would that do? I said it would make the Book of Mormon absolutely true. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, then where would be your faith? Yeah. And I was, okay, that's an answer I can accept.
Mm-hmm. That's an answer you realize how logically problematic that is. He's saying that because there is no evidence, therefore it requires faith, therefore that makes it more probable. It's a complete reversal. It is the most convoluted type thing you could imagine.
One of my issues was Joseph Smith. First, it was the one where he was a treasure.
Think about how far you could take that. Like, you could say that if the argument was so convincing that you were wrong, you could just say, well, this is an area in which God is testing me all the more. And so I need to have all the more faith to believe what is logically completely flawed in order that I can put all of my strength in God. And you could rationalize absolutely anything through that kind of logic.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm a visionary, because I'm not, but I had like this scene in my head where Heavenly Father the Lord walks up to me, and he's got his hands like this. And he walks up to me and he says, okay, I have kept this safe and warm for you. Now it's your turn to keep it. This time, take care of it. And he touches my chest. My testimony's back. And for the first time in my life, it dawned on me that the testimony, when I was at LDS the first time, it was like the testimony was in the...
So, again, there's this cognitive dissonance. It's all about narratives. Keep in mind, right, when he's flipping back to his previous set of beliefs, it's not a logical thing that's happening. There's no rationalization taking place. He's not going back through the LDS arguments and thinking, no, actually, in retrospect, I was wrong to think that. No, that's not what's happening. This is purely him going through this kind of unconscious process of finding within himself ways that he can believe what he intellectually knows is not correct. And why is he doing that? Because the life he is able to have in the LDS Church is more desirable. Again, is that a conscious decision? Is that an unconscious decision? This life gives him status. This life gives him a purpose even. This life gives him stability. It's a good life. I can see why it would appeal to him so much.
Are you from Texas? I said, yes. He said, I own property in Texas. I said, cool. Mm-hmm. And we got to the why I'm here, and I said, well, if you heard the President Uchtdorf's talk in October, then you know why I'm here. That was me. And he goes, really? Will you talk to me for a minute? And I said, sure. So my wife and I walk over with this guy, and another guy kind of follows. So I'm telling this guy my story. Mm-hmm. And I get finished, and the other guy that followed him says, you're from Dallas? And I said, yes. And he goes, Oak Cliff? I said, yep. He said, you probably don't remember me, but in 2009, I came to your house and gave you a blessing. It gets better.
Why? Coincidence, miraculous overlay. That's what this entire video basically is. This is just his miracle narrative overlaid across an ordinary life with ordinary coincidences that happen to everyone.
Turns out that he was inactive.
Wow.
His bishop told him to go to General Conference, priesthood session, and he goes, because of President Uchtdorf's talk, he reactivates, not realizing that the guy President Uchtdorf talked about was the guy that he knew in Dallas, Texas in 2009. Came up to his house and gave him a blessing.
My goodness. Wow.
Is this not bizarre?
I don't know why I'm laughing. It's like laughters of joy. That's amazing.
And so it's just been one of these...
Did you say laughters of joy?
Laughters of joy.
Laughters of sadness? Is that a thing?
Yeah,
it is.
For him it is. I find that people who read the Constitution laugh sadly. And by the way, sadly is now a word.
Anyway, that's enough cringe, I think, for one day. Thanks for watching. Again, if you've gotten this far in the video and you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and do that. I think this is working as a format. If you've got any more suggestions or thoughts, please do leave them in the description. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, everyone.